Hello everyone, my name is Derek and welcome to the Netflix Knowhow, the movie review show here to help you stop browsing and start watching. Today we are going to be taking a look at the bluesy southern drama Black Snake Moan, the goofy Chinese action film Shaolin Soccer, and the 80s cinematic classic Who Framed Roger Rabbit. So strap in, juice up, and let's jump on into the Netflixverse. First up is Black Snake Moan, a drama film directed by Craig Brewer and starring Samuel L. Jackson, Christina Ricci, and Justin Timberlake. The Netflix synopsis reads, Lazarus finds Ray beaten and near death and acts as a father figure to help redeem her, but before saving anyone, Lazarus must face his own demons. Man, everybody be having daddy issues. So Ray, played by Christina Ricci, is basically known as the town slut. Their words, not mine. She's a nymphomaniac with a traumatic past, and her addiction leads her to land in some pretty rough spots. Like beaten and left for dead on the side of the road rough. Thankfully Lazarus, played by none other than Samuel Jackson himself, happens to find Ray on the side of the road and manages to nurse her back to health. Which is great and all, except he then decides that it's his God-given duty to rehabilitate her via some rather questionable methods. Yeah, chaining someone to a radiator is pretty shady in any context. Black Snake Moan is an atmospheric and soulful drama featuring tortured, compelling characters and a really unique premise that unfortunately doesn't quite live up to the heights it aspires to. I've already talked a little bit about Ray's traumatic past and her debilitating addiction, but Lazarus is actually a very troubled character himself. At the beginning of the film, we see that his wife has left him for another man, and he is struggling to make sense of everything after the woman he made a lifelong commitment to betrays his love. Both of these characters are broken in their own ways, and it is heartbreaking to see them deal with agonizing emotional pain that there really isn't a good cure for. The dynamic between them is brilliantly set up. I'm not going to say too much so as not to give any spoilers, but I will say that they are positioned in such a way that they sort of fill a void in each other's lives for something that was ripped away from them in their past. Lazarus is like the loving, protective father that Ray never got to have, and Ray represents the daughter that Lazarus never got to experience. They are the yin to each other's yang in a depressing kind of way. What makes the film interesting is Lazarus' seemingly indefensible abduction tactics. See, most people would offer a helping hand or some kind of emotional support for someone who's struggling with addiction in one form or another. Lazarus decides that essentially kidnapping her is the best option. Now, I understand why he does it. The last woman in his life resorted to immoral infidelity, and he sure as heck is not going to let this little Spitfire go around disgracing the word of God with her promiscuous ways. So we have this amazing scenario where Lazarus is pulling some pretty shady tactics all in the name of a good cause, while Ray is trying to deal with this whole being abducted situation. Now I want you to take a second to think about all of the complex moral and ethical themes that could be explored with this setup. And it's gone. That's right. Not 20 minutes later he takes the stupid chain off. What? Why? Why would you do that? The second that chain comes off, all of the dramatic tension that had been building up to that point just deflates from the room like a balloon that's just kind of spinning around until it sputters out and lands flat on the floor. I mean, I guess things still do happen and their father-daughter relationship does still develop fine. It's just really not the story I was wanting to see after being given that really cool setup. It just really sucks because everything else about the movie is great. The strongest point by far is the music, which is a soulful, bluesy soundtrack that you can't help but close your eyes and hum along to. There are a few scenes that feature just Lazarus playing his guitar and singing, and they are an emotional gut punch straight to the core. Those scenes alone might honestly be worth the watch. It's just so disappointing to see this movie squander away such strong potential from its initial premise. Black Snake Moan is still a soulful and rich film, but it had me moaning for a much more risky and rewarding experience in the end. Thumbs down. Next up is Shaolin Soccer, an international action and adventure film directed by and starring Stephen Chow, and also starring, one of these days I might do a foreign film whose actors' names I can actually pronounce, but for now, I'm just gonna put their names on the screen for this one. Also starring this lovely actor, this lovely actress, and this lovely actor. The Netflix synopsis reads, A down-and-out soccer player joins forces with a former monk to assemble an unlikely team of players to win the China Super Cup soccer tournament. Well, geez, when you put it that way, it sounds like the Kung Fu sports version of the Avengers. You know, that's not too far off, actually. I'd give you a more expanded breakdown of the plot, but everything you need to know is basically right there in the title. Shaolin Soccer. It's Kung Fu fighting soccer players, and we thought a Kung Fu fighting bear was something to talk about. I'm not going to even bother talking about the characters because, well, there aren't any. You've got your cartoonishly evil villain, your adorable underdog hero, an awkwardly sweet love interest, and a whole slew of zany Kung Fu masters. Throw in a series of over-the-top action sequences complete with ragdoll physics, and you've got yourself a jolly good sports romp that is the epitome of popcorn movie fun. It's basically a cartoon. If you've ever watched Looney Tunes, you kind of have an idea of what you'll be getting here. It's a big, dumb, silly movie that revels gleefully in its absurd premise and doesn't let up until the end credits roll. So as you can guess, I'm a pretty big fan of this movie. But Derek, what about the lack of deep characters and compelling moral conflict? Don't care. What about the simplistic story and over-reliance on exposition? Doesn't matter. What about the confusing editing and occasionally distasteful jokes? Have you tried mochi? This stuff is delicious. Yes, I get it. The movie has its problems. Lots of them, if I'm being completely honest. But at the end of the day, none of those things really matter because that's not what the movie is trying to be. It is a movie that completely understands what it is and what it isn't, and it doesn't waste time on the things that don't matter. It has just enough of the necessary elements to hold it together as a cohesive film. But let's be realistic here. It's Shaolin Soccer. We're here to see some Kung Fu masters kick the crap out of a soccer ball. It's amazing. Okay. I do have one legitimate complaint. This is some of the worst soccer teamwork I have ever seen in my life. Not to be nitpicky, but I've played soccer my entire life, and so watching the players stand by idly as the opposing team takes pot shots at their goalie over and over and over again is just, well... Go help your goalie play defense! Do something, God! On the flip side of that, why are they kicking the balls directly at the goalie? Pretty sure the point of the game is to put the ball in the back of the net, not play pinball with the person blocking the shots. Therefore, I must sadly award Shaolin Soccer a thumbs down. Ha! Just kidding. This is seriously one of the most entertaining things I've seen in my life. Go watch it, it's wonderful. Thumbs up. Finally, we have Who Framed Roger Rabbit, a comedy film directed by Robert Zemeckis and starring Bob Hoskins, Christopher Lloyd, Joanna Cassidy, and the voice talents of Charles Fleischer and Kathleen Turner. The Netflix synopsis reads, in this groundbreaking blend of animation and live action, a gruff gumshoe agrees to take on the case of a cartoon who's been framed for murder. Guys, I'm gonna be completely honest about this. I have not actually seen Who Framed Roger Rabbit from beginning to end until now. I know, I'm a terrible person, shame on me, I'm bad, I get it. But the important thing is that I've seen it now, right? And boy oh boy, did it not disappoint. That's kind of a tricky place for a movie to be in where it has this huge reputation built up over years and years, and then when you finally see it for the first time, it's like, does it really live up to the hype? With Roger Rabbit, the answer is undoubtedly, unequivocally, yes. Even after all these years, this film is still a marvel of filmmaking technology. You know you have a good-looking film on your hands when it was made in the late 80s, and it still manages to look better than some of the computer-generated monstrosities that Hollywood cranks out these days. Obviously, it's not a perfect film, and you can see some of the visual cracks if you really look hard enough, but the film does an absolutely phenomenal job convincing you that these cartoons are just as alive and real as the human being standing right there next to them. Speaking of humans, Bob Hoskins, what a guy. The man has left quite the legacy behind him, and it definitely shows here. Simultaneously gruff, weathered, heartbroken, and warm-hearted, Bob Hoskins' portrayal of Detective Eddie Valiant is nothing short of masterful here. It's one of those roles that you can't possibly imagine another actor playing, and he nails it. There's also a pantheon of entertaining, energetic side characters that are just as colorful, if not more so, than their cartoon counterparts. And the cartoons themselves. There are a ton of them here, and they are all a total hoot. We get cameo appearances from everyone from Daffy Duck and Woody Woodpecker all the way down to Mickey Mouse and Betty Boop. With so many high-profile cartoon character appearances, I'm really happy that they remained focused on the main characters and story rather than turning this into a who's who of cartoon icons. I have to admit, I was initially skeptical of Roger Rabbit himself. I was afraid that he might become overbearingly obnoxious not 10 minutes in, but this film definitely had a way of turning all of my doubts upside down. Although Roger is a bombshell of hyper energy and slapstick stupidity, he's still genuinely empathetic and relatable. I felt bad for the poor guy, and I really did want to see his happily ever after with Jessica Rabbit, even if his presence often made situations a lot more problematic than they needed to be. I was a little disappointed with Jessica. Yeah, she's got that whole sex appeal thing going for her. Hasn't exactly aged well in the intervening years. She's not a bad character, but I definitely got the feeling she was just a little bit underdeveloped. A little bit two-dimensional. At the very least, I do appreciate that she was given proactive things to do rather than being relegated to the stereotypical damsel in distress. I do think Christopher Lloyd was a little bit wasted as the primary villain too, and the story definitely kinda gets smushed together at the end to resolve a lot of the plot points. But it does feature a thrilling action sequence complete with ridiculous cartoon antics, so that's always fun. Who Framed Roger Rabbit is more than worthy of its status as a groundbreaking cinema classic. Loved it. And I really regret that it took me so long to experience this. Don't make my mistakes and go watch this now if you haven't already. Thumbs up. Thank you all so much for tuning in and watching. I appreciate every single one of you. If you've seen any of these movies, go ahead and leave your comments and opinions below. I'd love to hear what you thought of them. Also, if you have any suggestions for movies, go ahead and comment them down there and maybe I'll feature them in a future episode. Now, you ready for this announcement? I've only been talking about it for the past few weeks. You ready? Twitter's still not ready. Yeah, I know, I fail. In my defense, I was up in Wyoming for the solar eclipse. I decided to go up, spend a few days up there with some family, and we camped out in the Path of Totality. So hopefully some of you got to go up and see that wherever you were. It's truly one of the coolest things, probably the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. So definitely a life-changing experience. Even if you couldn't see it in the Path of Totality, hopefully you were able to see it wherever you were. But anyway, that's where I was, so I was a little crunched this week. If all goes well, I should have Twitter up next week, up and running, and then you can follow me on there for all of you lovely Twitter users. In the meantime, you can always head over to Facebook, you can follow me on there. If you like this content, you can subscribe on here. I post every Friday, and that's all I have for you today. So as always, if you want to know your flicks, you know where to click. Happy hunting, guys. See you next week.